Call a special board meeting of the West Bay Municipal Water District Board of Directors to order. And ask the general manager to call the roll.
Happy to do so, Mr. President. Director Gloria Gray,
Here.
Director Tommy Flavai.
Here.
Director Desi Alvarez.
Here.
Director Scott Houston. President Don Deere.
Here. Everyone here, very good. We have a quorum. Is there any public comments?
Mr. President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting has been held both in person and virtually. If there is any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand.
There are none and there are no presentations. So we'll go to the action calendar, item A.
Yes, Mr. President. Item 5A is to approve a sponsorship of fiscal year 2025-2026 community outreach event. And for this presentation, we have Hazel Vasquez, our Deputy Board Secretary 2, and the item begins on packet page 3.
President Deere, members of the board. As EJ mentioned, this item begins on packet page 3, and today I only have one item for your consideration. HELP, also known as Helping Elders Live Productively, is hosting their 2026 Gala Benefit on Saturday, March 21, 2026. At this time, Director Houston recommends sponsoring the 2026 Gala Benefit for $1,000, and if approved, that sponsorship would grant West Basin an advertisement via a logo placement with conservation messaging. This sponsorship would also include tickets to the event, and that is similar to the sponsorship we had with them back in 2025 for the same amount of $1,000, where we received those same benefits. The documents that they have provided for this year's request are included in attachment A, and you can find those beginning on packet page 5. And as always, we'll go over the fiscal impact, where you can find the language for that on packet page 4. So as you are aware, we do have $75,000 budgeted for the fiscal year 25-26 community outreach sponsorships. If this request is approved at the amount that is being recommended by Director Houston today for $1,000, that would leave a remaining balance of $15,000, and the details of that are shown in attachment B on packet page 9. With that, I will read the recommendation. Director Houston recommends that the board approve sponsorship of the HELP 2026 Gala Benefit on Saturday, March 21, 2026 for $1,000. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, is there a question there?
I'll go ahead and move that.
Before you, that's good, you'll do that first. The motion was moved by Director Houston and,
Second,
okay, do you also have something you want to add, or verbally, gentlemen, either one of you? No, Tommy seconds. Any other discussion? Please call the roll on the motion.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Tommy Flavai,
yes.
Director Desi Alvarez, Director Scott Houston,
Yes.
President Don Deere.
Yes, and the motion passed. Okay, we'll go on to item 5B.
Yes, President Deere. Item 5B is a contract award for financial audit services. This item was originally heard by the Finance and Administrative Committee held earlier in the month of February, and then was moved forward to the Board of Directors without a recommendation from the committee. The item was then heard at the February board meeting just last week. And after a great deal of discussion, the item was agendized for this special board meeting with no recommendation. It's important to note that after the board meeting, I worked with the Chief Financial Officer to review our process. I reviewed the admin code in relation to the solicitation of professional and non-professional services, including the competitive solicitation process, the request for proposal process, the process for formal competitive solicitations, and the interview process. At the conclusion of that review of the scores, and again, my further conversations with the Chief Financial Officer, I'm very satisfied that staff did meet the fair and transparent process identified in the admin code. And therefore, I do stand by that process, and I do stand by the recommendation before you. That recommendation is that the board authorize the general manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Davis Barr LLP for financial audit services for fiscal year 2026 through 2030 for a total not to exceed contract amount of $315,858. There is a board memo and presentation or materials, supplemental materials in the packet. It begins on packet page 10. Again, as we did for the Finance and Administrative Committee as well as the board meeting, we do have Wendy O'Kelly, our Chief Financial Officer, here if the board would like a presentation or for additional questions. So with that, Mr. President, I'm happy to answer questions.
Chair,
Go ahead, Tommy.
I think, I just wanted to, make a motion that we skip the presentation, and I would like to make a recommendation.
You want to make a motion?
Yeah.
Motion to skip presentation and to do what?
My motion is to, kick the bids out, go back out for RFP. And, you know, the way the process, happened, I feel there's still some things that still need to be done when it comes to the process. And, I spoke with you, EJ, about that, when it comes to the certifications, having minority business owned, veteran business owned, women business owned. I like to see that in this type of process. And then also, I know how the process happened when it comes to all 9 bidders being responsive, which, I think we shouldn't count that out on all 9 being responsive. And I feel that all 9 of them should have been interviewed instead of just 3 being interviewed. And then also the cost when it comes to all of the bidders that have turned in their bid. The top 3, their costs are very high compared to the lowest bidder. And, when it comes to cost, I want to make sure that, that we're, using, West Basin's money transparent. And then we're keeping these vendors accountable, for, when they bid to RFP. So I feel that the way the process is nothing against the staff. I like to see more in the admin code that we can help the process when it comes to being fair across the board. That's all I'm saying, DJ, when it comes to your staff. Your staff does an amazing job. Nothing against your staff. But, I like to see, more added to the process when it goes back out again. And I know it's, I know we're going to spend more money on new RFP going back out, but I think in fairness, I think, we should put it back out to bid and put a new RFP and put it back out to bid. And that's my motion, Chair Deere.
I'll second that for purpose of discussion. Is there any other discussion?
Oh, I have a lot of discussion, Mr. President.
Greg, go right ahead.
Yeah,
Dr.
I
Gray,
have a
go
lot of
ahead.
questions. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Director Favive. I really want to kind of go through your concerns because, the input to the staff to me wasn't quite clear. So I want to make sure I understand what you're asking for because you said a whole lot, and thank you for saying all of those things. I just want to make sure that that is not something that we're doing or something we can do, and if we do, that it makes it's fair and equitable because I think that's what your goal is. So I'd like to hear from staff, and if you could specifically kind of go through what you're asking for. I know one thing you said that I remembered was that you said the lowest response we got, I think it's the Vasquez, I think it says 55,000. Am I looking at this right? And then I look at the one that the staff is recommending. It's not a whole lot of difference in the cost, what they would charge, unless I'm not looking at this right. So Then I want to ask how much it's going to cost to go back out and do an RFP or RFQ again. What is the cost of that, and what was the cost of even doing this? And kind of, is this different from a process that we've had in the past? And if we can incorporate some of the things that Director Favive said, I mean, how do we do that? So I'd like EJ to kind of respond. I know that's a lot, but I really want to talk about this.
Thank you, Director Gray. And I'm going to try to walk you through what I believe I heard Director Favive say, was that he's asked us to put out a new RFP, initiate that process. The first thing I would do is work with the CFO to make sure that any gap between our current auditing firm and where this process would play out through a fair and transparent RFP process to see if we needed any supplemental services. But if there's no limitation as far as that goes, I would put out an RFP and we would begin the process. I mentioned again at the start of my conversation on this item was that I'm very satisfied that we met the requirements within the admin. But I do hear what Director Favive is saying, and he's asking us to interview more firms. He's trying to broaden up that process. He'd like to see more firms engaged, and he would really like to see the establishment of a stronger SBE and LBE program. Now, I have our legal counsel working on the SBE and LBE program, and I've told them that it's one of my highest priorities at this time, along with our Buy America policy. But we would need to establish that, obviously, and get that before the board for the board to consider it and then adopt it. So I don't know that a more robust SBE program would impact this. And then the next piece of it is how do we get more firms to interview? And this is something that Director Favive and I have discussed. And, our current scoring practice, if you look at packet page 13 and the maximum points, there's 107 points allowable in the review process. And so, yes, what I heard is correct. We do have 9 responsive proposals. Staff reviews those, and just mathematically, if you review the scores of just the blind interview or blind review panel, some of these firms are mathematically unable to achieve the top score. And so that's the real question, is how many firms should we in each case interview? We don't want to waste the time of the proposer and staff time. We run a very lean and mean ship here. And so to have 3 of our top finance department people on this, I do want to be mindful of their time. In this case, if you review the scores of the proposals and the score of the 3 that were interviewed, mathematically, the top score would still be the top scorer. And so I want to make this very clear that we can begin the review process and the RFP process again, and we can go through that. But if we were to assume that the proposals were the same from all the firms, and we were to utilize a similar but maybe broader review panel, if the scores are aligned kind of like they were this first time, I cannot guarantee a change in the outcome of the scores. I would just preface that. So when it comes to the time and the financial aspect of this that Director Favive mentioned, in my opinion, we need to have 3 to 4, and when I say 3 to 4, 3 West Basin and possibly 1 or 2 outside third-party reviewers. And to interview all 9, it would take about 2 days, 1 full day assuming at least 1 hour of review for each of the proposals, and then an interview process of an hour for each firm. You're talking a minimal of 2 full days for all of the review people, and that's not to that does not include the admin time as well as the procurement time. But to Director Favive's point, he is concerned, and he's expressed that to me that he does not want to waste the time of staff. He's very mindful of that, and I do appreciate it. And I do want to say, Director Favive, I greatly appreciate the comments about staff. Because that's one thing I really tried to let them know is that I reviewed the admin code and our process on this one with kind of a close eye to see where or how there were any missteps. And I was very pleased to see the way they interacted with the panel, the fair and transparent process with the blind scoring and procurement, and then ultimately meeting all of the requirements within the admin code.
Mr. President, I have other
Go ahead.
comments. Yeah, thank
ahead,
you,
Dr.
EJ,
Gray.
for those comments. Right. You know, if the goal or what we're trying to achieve is to bring in more local businesses or minority-owned businesses or veterans, or if we decide we needed to interview all responders to an RFP, isn't that something that we have to have as a policy in terms of any kind of RFP we put out, not just this particular one? Because, you know, I agree. I mean, we should try to make sure we do a better not better, just a comprehensive outreach to make sure we do as much as we can to bring local businesses in to respond for opportunities, as well as minority-owned businesses and veterans, and all of those are women-owned, that we have more of a diverse group of companies that are responding. But if we're looking at interviewing everyone who responds, shouldn't that be a policy across the board? I mean, all of these things, shouldn't there be a policy that the board decides on for every RFP?
I would just say,
EJ, that would be EJ.
yeah. Well, I would say generally speaking, yes. If we were, and this much I promise you, staff will always adhere to our admin code, and I will work with them to make sure that happens. If we were to broaden up that procurement process, it would need to be done through the admin code so that it's very clear and as specific as to what that review process looks like. Again, anytime you're using a scoring process, there are times where there becomes a separation of scores. So much so that some firms that have proposed may not be able to mathematically jump into that top 3 or 5 with the interview process. And so I would caution, I mean, this is an excellent procurement, and I've discussed this with Director Fava as well. You know, we originally had one proposer because we did it in the month of November. And so you have the Thanksgiving holiday and Veterans Day as well. And so we extended the procurement process, and ultimately we got 8 additional firms, so a total of 9 firms for us to review. That's an excellent process, and one that shows that the outreach and our efforts are working as far as getting maximum participation. But if we were to say we want to interview every time, you know, there's times where we get 20 plus proposals. And as I mentioned, just in this one, if the minimal amount of time is 2 full days of work for those that are involved in the review process, which is a significant amount of time for an agency like West Basins.
Yeah, my point is that if we do it for this particular RFP, then I think it's only fair to consider it for others. I mean, to me, it would be kind of unfair just to do it here and not do it for other, folks that respond to an RFP. I agree with those points that Director Fava was making in terms of making sure that we do this. So I'm just trying to figure out how to accomplish this across the board. Is there a general counsel? Is there a general counsel there, Mr. President? Should we ask what would be the right process to do this?
Yeah. Hi, Director Gray. This is Joe. I am here. The code, the one thing we were talking about with the number of interviews, the code leaves it to the staff to determine, it says the most qualified proposers. And I think to EJ's point, he's saying that after initial scoring, they make a determination of who's near the top in the interview or who's near the top. And usually it's around 3. Sometimes it can be more. And I let him chime in on that, but.
Well, and the only thing I would add is that, as we all know, because we handle so many of these types of procurements, there are some that are very general in the sense that you're looking at different approaches and strategies. I'll just use a couple. It could be legal services, where the prices may be high and may be low, but the firm and and not to pick on you, Joe, but you could imagine where you'd want to meet maybe all of those firms because they have such specialized services and such. When you look at government affairs specialist, for instance, you may want to proposals, but you may want to get more into the details to see exactly where the relationships are and the work that can be done. So sometimes you may be interviewing a lot more, and sometimes you may be interviewing a lot less. But as Joe said, what we're trying to do is find the most qualified firms, and we utilize the blind evaluation process to determine that top tier.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I respond? Chair Gray, I just wanted to mention, since I've been on the board since February, and it's been 1 year. And one of the three priorities that I had was just this, when it comes to being inclusive with the certifications that were mentioned, whether it's veteran owned or minority business owned or women business owned. I've been sticking to that priority since I've been on the board for a year. I feel that this is the fair process to put it back out for a new RFP, so we can have a fair process. I get what a general manager mentioned about the staff time is going to take 2 days, maybe close to 2 days for to go through the process. But I think we shouldn't undermine the fairness of the process. And if it takes 2 days of staff time, it takes 2 days of staff time. And, I think we shouldn't compromise that. That's my statements.
Yeah.
Desi?
Mr. Chair, can I just respond? Hello.
Go ahead, Director Gray.
Thank you. Just, Director Favive, I think we all agree about inclusivity. I mean, I think this board has focused on that for a long time. That's why we have some of the things in our code, and certainly there's always room for improvement and doing something a little bit different and looking at things. I'm just trying to figure out how do we do this to make sure the opportunities are for anyone that applies for any work there, whether it's an audit firm or if it's contract doing whatever. So I'm trying to figure out how do we do this across the board. I'm not opposed to doing it better or looking at something a little bit different, but I just want to make that statement that I think we all agree that we should be inclusive and look at all those things that you mentioned and that I have mentioned, that we want to make sure it's fair across the board. So that's the purpose in having a lengthy discussion about it. Thank you,
Thank you.
Chair, President. Mhm.
Desi?
Thank you. I just have a couple of follow-up questions, and I'll start out with a comment. I am very appreciative of the fact that we need to reach out to as many firms as possible. And thank you for going out after you only got one proposal. And I think probably the result of getting more was making phone calls and taking a more hands-on approach. And for that, I'm very appreciative. Also, with respect to small business enterprises, small business, women-owned enterprises, etc., is something that we've always encouraged, and I'm a very strong proponent of. So that's a critical component. I think in a lot of times when we have procure professional services, especially engineering services, we have not been very good at reaching out or making it possible for small business enterprises, and I've brought that point up many times, that it would be much better for this agency to reach out to small businesses and make the procurement process friendly to small business. We do not have a small business friendly procurement process, at least not for engineering services. So in this case, thank you for doing the personal reach out, which is much more business or small business friendly type of a process. I do have a couple of follow-up questions. We did get a total of 9 proposals. 3 were ranked high. Of the 9 proposals, how many were small business enterprises?
There was one that, and this is a self-certification process in our RFP. And so one firm noted the small business.
Well, small business and women-owned, et cetera.
There's only one that checked that box. There is a definition.
What is LBE?
That's a local business enterprise. And that is any business that has their office within a 25-mile radius of the Donald L. Deere headquarter building.
So we had 1 small business enterprise and 2 local businesses who submitted proposals.
Correct.
Right. Of the 3 small business and the 2 local businesses, how many were in the top 3?
One was.
And that was,
Brown Armstrong Accountancy Corporation.
and they are a small business or a local?
Correct. Small business.
So we did have 1 small business that was ranked high enough to make it into the top 3 for the interview process.
That is correct.
In terms of the overall cost, this cost seems to be a big issue. What's the difference between the lowest cost submitted and the highest cost submitted
Of those interviewed or those that applied?
of those that applied?
Those that applied, on the low end, it's 154,130 under one of the proposals.
Mhm.
On the high end, there was one that was $267,962.50.
Okay, so that's a pretty extensive range. Of the low end, you said was 154,000. The recommended award is for how much? The recommended firm.
The recommended firm was $180,250.
So 180 minus 154, that's a $26,000 difference, right?
Correct.
So we're looking at a delta of 26,000 between the lowest bid and the recommended awardee. And the spread was much more than that. It was over 154 to what much did you say?
267,960.
967. So over $113,000 spread between the low and the high. Not much of a difference then between the low and the recommended firm. If we go back
The
up,
number is different when it's a 5-year agreement. And the staff's recommendation is a 5-year agreement. So that cost,
well, the staff, I've been asking for the numbers and the staff's been telling me this is the numbers that being recommended. If the number's different, then we can
Both
do
of the
that.
numbers are on page 13 of the packet. So there is a 3-year, the agreement for auditing firms typically is a 3-year with the 2-year optional.
Okay, so we're awarding for 3 years.
There's a 3-year, what I wrote the recommendation is including the 5-year.
I apologize. I did not notice that.
it's a
I was
5-year.
looking at the three-year pricing. I apologize.
Okay, so what will that make the difference? If we went to, instead of the 3 years, if we went to the 5 years? So,
So the low for the 5-year is 261,350. And the high for the 5 years, 469,679.
261 to what?
261 to 469,
459.
69,
469?
correct.
So, 208,000. What would be the difference between the low and the recommended firm for 5 years?
Low is 261 and the recommended is 315 or 316 if you're rounding.
315. So that's about 50,000. Correct? So the delta for the 5 year, between the low and the high was over 200,000. And for the 5 years between the low and the high is about 50,000. When we award professional services, we're not bound by awarding it to the lowest bidder. We're
That is correct.
basically the best bid. In terms of the three recommended ones, and you said one was a small business enterprise, what would the small business enterprise bid come in for 5 years versus the 3 years?
The 5 year for, the
Small
small business is 317.
317. Okay. So just above what you're recommending, they would not be the lowest bidder in any case. Correct?
Correct.
All right, but you did interview and you did rank in the top three, a small business enterprise, the only small business enterprise that submitted a proposal.
That's correct.
Okay, so we meet the criteria that we have a small business enterprise. We went out and did a further outreach and got additional firms, one of which was a small business enterprise, or was that the original firm and the only firm that originally bid?
To my understanding, that was not the original one. The original one was a local business, and then we received with the additional 8, a small business and another local business.
Okay, so by going out and reaching out to firms, you did get a small business enterprise. So I think we're meeting all of the criteria that we have in our administrative code in terms of reach out. And I'm very pleased to see that we, in this particular case, we did make the phone calls and encourage people to bid and let them know, hey, by the way, if you didn't know, here's a RFP that you might be interested in submitting a proposal, and we would encourage you to do so. I'm assuming something like that took place. So we went through a process. We got a small business enterprise. We got a qualified small business enterprise that made the top 3 and was interviewed with the other 2. Although after the interview process, you actually went with the lowest bid of the top 3 in terms of price. So price at the end of the day probably had some consideration in there. Although that's not the overall consideration. So I think that we followed the process properly. I think that we've been consistent. I don't find and I don't agree that there's a basis for throwing all of this out and starting the process all over again. But if we started the process all over again, how long would it take to issue an RFP? Because we would have to revise the current RFP, I would imagine, and go through that process again. So what's that time frame approximately?
Approximately, after posting the RFP, I believe is held open for 14 days. And then after the 14 days, we start the process of evaluation.
How long would it take you to revise the RFP to issue the new RFP?
I don't think that there would be too much revision to the RFP unless there was a recommendation that came from the board to revise something on the RFP, but it would be the same scope of service that we'd be using.
If I understood correctly, there was a requirement, and I want to make sure it was in the RFP, for 3 specific deliverables.
Correct.
And so we had, of the 9 firms submitted, only 3 that agreed to provide those 3 deliverables.
I think what I mentioned in the last board meeting was out of the 3 that are in the recommendation that were interviewed, those 3 did meet all 3 criteria.
All right, so they met all the criteria, and that criteria would be again, so anybody that does not meet that criteria would not be qualified. Because they were not going to make those deliverables, and that's a criteria.
That was a criteria, yes, is in the scope of service.
So we would reissue it, the process that would take approximately a month. You said 14 days for the RFP. I assume it's gonna take you guys a week or 2 weeks to issue the RFP again, so we'll delay this by a month. Then you have to go through the interview process again, and assuming that all the same firms resubmit, which they might, we would then spend 2 days interviewing. Is that correct?
That's a minimal. I mean, if you can imagine 9 hours of interview, you usually take some time in between. So
And how many people are in that interview board?
Right now, the evaluation consists of 3 people.
They're 3 of our staff.
The current process of what we did, yes.
Okay, so 3 of our staff for 2 days. So that's basically 48 hours of staff time.
Also 2 outside staff people, right?
Well, I said that if we were to begin this process again, I would, because otherwise it would be the exact same panel. And so if we were to do this process again, I would look to have 1 to 2 outside panelists, which is a requirement. If you look at our admin code, we would typically do that for procurement of services above 500,000.
The point is still, it's another 48 hours of investment in the process. I don't find that the process is faulty. I don't think that we did not do enough to reach out to small and minority firms. As a matter of fact, we did do what we probably should do for a lot of our engineering procurement that I don't think we do. So don't believe that it's worth delaying this. And I'm gonna make a substitute motion that we go with the staff recommendation and award a contract to, what's the name of the firm?
The firm that was recommended is Davis Farr LLP.
However, I just want to make sure that that was in the staff recommendation on the cheapest of the 3, but you were asking questions about the SBE, which is Brown Armstrong. So I just want to make sure that.
But my recommendation is that we go with the staff recommendation.
All right, is there a second?
Okay.
All right.
I'm sorry,
Roger.
can you repeat? Okay.
Director Gray, my motion was a substitute motion that we go with the staff recommendation as provided. And the reasoning is that 1, they did reach out. They were able to procure small business and the whole business enterprise to submit. The small business enterprise was highly ranked, although it is not the one that's being recommended for award. It is one of the top 3 firms. They are not the lowest in terms of cost. Of the top 3 firms, the one that's being recommended is the lowest cost, I think. So we met the SBE criteria of reaching out to firms. Delaying this isn't going to, in my opinion, just causes more confusion and people to say what's going on at West Basin when they went through a good procurement process. I haven't not seen any faults in the procurement process at all. And I'm probably as critical of the procurement process here as any other board member. So I think that at this point, there is no justification for delaying the bids or not for delaying, for basically canceling the process and starting from scratch. Therefore, I made the substitute motion of going with the staff recommendation, which is what the general manager at the opening and introduction of the items recommended again, as he did at the last board meeting where this was considered, and stood by the recommendations and the process that was followed by staff, and said that it does follow all of our procurement guidelines. So that's why I made the substitute motion.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
Point of clarification, Mr. President.
Yes?
Can we continue to have discussion? Do we have to consider the motion first?
No, we can continue to discuss.
Okay. And first of all, thank you, Director Alvarez, for the motion and explaining it. I'd like to kind of go back to Director Favai's comments and kind of see if what has been discussed, that if some of the issues that he expressed, if he feels that they can be addressed, that the way that we have discussed it would give a direction to staff today and moving forward with what the staff recommendation is. So I'd like to kind of pose that question to Director Favai.
Director?
Yeah, thanks, Director Gray. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with the motion that I made. When it comes to putting it back up to RFP, like I mentioned earlier. I feel that, we've been talking about this issue on certifications for a long time. And, I think we come to a point where, we have to make a statement on this and move forward. So I think, just, with my recommendation that I made the motion on, I'm gonna stick to that motion on putting it back out for RFP. And then going from there. But also what I wanted to mention too, Director Gray, is that this is to EJ. Because if you go back to the small business enterprise, I think when it comes to federal a certification, that if you're automatically a minority business enterprise, that you actually qualify as a small business enterprise. Is that the case? EJ or?
Yeah, I believe that was the case, but there's a new executive order administration that calls that into question. So, I mean, it's a good segue just to provide an update. So we do have a small business and local business policy that's in the admin code, which was followed here. And in addition to them being considered, there was an extra bump that was given. And what I'm looking at, and EJ was talking about, General Manager was talking about earlier, is how to expand upon that and what is within the bounds of the law. There's an opportunity to provide something for veterans, which is not currently in our administrative code. It is more challenging on women and minority-owned businesses, given that the kind of safe harbor on that was the federal side of things. Prop 209 on the state level prohibits us from providing any kind of a bump for those specifically. In fact, Proposition 209 is referenced explicitly in our admin code. So, and I do want to say that what the General Manager said earlier is, for purposes of this next solicitation, I don't think it's realistic that we're going to have edits that are going to incorporate new components, because it is a little complicated, and we do have, in my opinion, the pretty robust local and small business components, which certainly we can look at how to improve upon. But it's going to take a little bit of time to do that with some presentation of the board on kind of legality of what we can do on the other areas.
If I can have a follow-up question for Director Fave. Since there is a small business enterprise that was highly ranked, can you explain why you think that the staff did not reach out to small business enterprises? And I, under the category of the umbrella of small business enterprise, typically, most people consider that women-owned, minority-owned businesses. And I thought till just now, veteran businesses were included in the small business enterprise category. So given that the small business enterprise was considered and only submitted a proposal after staff did the further outreach, what specifically in the process do you find that staff failed to reach out and get small business enterprises to submit proposals?
Yeah, I'm not saying that the staff failed to reach out to small businesses or local businesses. I'm not saying that, Lizzie. What I am saying is that we have to make sure that there's a fair process here. And we got to be more inclusive of the business certifications out there as well.
Again, more inclusive, but you can't go out and put and identify a firm and say, here, you better submit a proposal. So we went out and we asked people to submit proposals, small businesses submitted their proposals. How much more inclusive? What would you do to be more inclusive than that?
Maybe EJ can answer that for you.
Well, the question is for you. You're the one that brought up that the process is not
I've
inclusive.
already made a motion, and that's where I'm going.
We have to maintain our parliamentary procedures here. We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded, and that's the one we should be discussing at this time.
We have a
substitute motion that does not
and we
have
have
a-
delayed the second for the
Yeah.
discussion.
Well, the substitute motion never got a second.
Right, well, before,
But Director Gray said,
Well, 1 minute, wait, one more. Go ahead.
yeah, Director Gray had asked whether she could have discussion prior to seconding that motion.
Oh,
or
I
not. So it's still, that's
Yes,
still
I did.
technically, we're at a substitute motion waiting for a second stage or lack of.
And we're
Thank
still,
you for correcting me on that.
right,
All right, so we have
Right,
discussion
right.
on the substitute motion?
yeah. Um, um, I thank all my colleagues for the comments, and we will address the substitute motion. In fact, I have a friendly amendment to it. But I do want to ask, and maybe, there's no response to this, but Director Favive, do you feel there are other businesses out there that did not receive notification? Maybe that's the issue, and we should figure out how to make sure they're included. Are there some other businesses out there? If you don't care, if you can't respond, then fine. I just want to make sure we're trying to figure out how to address this in the future.
Yeah, I think that's more of a staff question, Director
Okay.
Gray. Yeah, obviously,
Okay.
yes, when you reach out, are we taking advantage of all of the portals that
Yeah.
are out there when it comes to, reaching out to all of the firms?
Yeah.
That's a good question, Gloria
Yeah.
Gray. So I think
Yeah.
just, I think we can
And
move on from there.
yeah. And
Okay, staff
Doc,
comment
and
on
direct, and Doc,
One
Director
second,
Favive,
Director.
okay. Sorry.
I was asking if there's any staff comment on the comment made by the previous director.
Yes, I would just say that at the direction of the board of directors, we've been conducting extensive outreach in all of our RFPs, including the engineering ones, because we've been looking for small businesses on that side and looking at how to qualify those and make sure that we get and add small businesses to that. West Basin staff attends every procurement fair that's held by Metropolitan Water District and within our region, and then outside of our region. So we're doing a great deal of work, but it doesn't end here. We need to continue to do that, and we will.
Thank you.
And thank you for that. And the last comment, the chair, and then I will offer a friendly amendment, is that we've had, this board has had this type of discussion for many sessions. We've done this, and thank you, Director Favive, for kind of revisiting it. But we've had this discussion with general manager in terms of doing more thorough outreach, and so it's not new to them. There's always room for improvement. But my friendly amendment would be to address some of the issues that Director Favive has brought forth as best as staff can as part of that motion. Director Alvarez, if you could add that to your motion.
okay, so the motion would be to award the contract to the lowest responsible bidder, to the recommended bidder per staff recommendation, and to further address Director Fave's comments. That's
Yes.
perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, in the future on any other contract. So,
Right.
moving forward,
Okay.
that's and then I would second that motion with those amendments.
Okay. Further discussion?
On the
Yes.
motion?
Okay.
I'll just chime in real quick. And I appreciate everyone's time in all this. And, I understand, staff has followed the admin code. Totally get it. Looking at this chart real quick, I see only one was the SDE, just one. And then we had two that were local business enterprise, right? They're in our radius.
Within a 25-mile radius.
Okay. But by the way, those two, Vasquez, just a hair under on score here, but they also didn't get invited to interview. But I guess the question in part is, you have a preliminary process. Maybe you can explain it very briefly to us. Because, 9 folks submitted responses. Obviously, they got whittled down to 3 for interviews. And so I don't know how we address that in the future. You know, because we obviously cannot be interviewing everybody who submits proposals. I mean, that's just impossible. So I think that would be something maybe down the road. You can help us and figure that out. But before I answer that one, the other thing too, how do you pronounce the last one? Is it wins or wine? Wins, okay. And these folks, which I thought was interesting in committee, okay, yes, they're local business. But they were off the charts on the price and really scored poorly on whatever this first score came in, right? So I don't even understand what that's about, you know, if they, you know, were they actually serious? I mean, you know, how they're putting the price like that in, but then they don't score really well. I don't even know if they have an answer.
We just reviewed the proposals and,
totally.
I mean, there's just a lot of detail that they put in their proposals.
Okay. Because I get it too. By the way, sometimes people just throw things in and they're not going to get it and they just, you know, put a number on something and, you know, it's an exercise. But back to this. You had Vasquez, they're a local business. You know, they didn't apparently make quite the cut to be brought in for interview. So how do you all do that first round of whittling these down to the top? If it's 3 or 4 or 5, how do you do that?
Director Houston, in this case, so what they do is they do a blind score of the proposals. You can see that the total of the amount of the score is potentially 107 points. And the reason for that is there's 100 points total of the review of the proposal as well as the potential interview. But that 7 points is you could get 3 points if you're an LBE. If you're going to be if you're also an SBE, you get 3 additional points. So that's a total of 6. And I believe if you have a contractor, a subcontractor that meets either of those qualifications, you get 1 additional point. So you have a total of 7. You could score 107 points. In the case of Vasquez and Company, you can see that they scored a 78. That includes that 3 points. So the 75 total points as far as the written review. We do provide a 3-point bump for our SBE and LBE to give them an opportunity to jump in those. In this case, what they did is they took the 3 highest scores. So you can see there the 3 top. Yes, Vasquez Company did score below the number 3, the 78.33. But then, you know, what I've tried to do is look to see how this could have played out differently, because I want to make sure that the end result, you know, this is the staff recommendation, and we'll work this through the board process. But, you know, you just think about what would happen in an interview if they were to get a 1 total, you know, 10 points in that interview, and then where would that be? And that's why ultimately I said today that I stand by the recommendation.
So here's, look, I'm gonna support Director Favai on this one. But I am very cautious about, you know, how we reinvent the wheel on things. You all have done a great job to reach out, to bring in more people to do this. And by the way, this is a unique situation. It's a financial auditing, not building construction, so other things we'd be talking about. And the other thing is a couple of these scores are so close that had that organization been an SBE or an LBE or a both, they would have popped right up into these 2. So these are all some pretty competitive firms. Only a couple heavy outliers up front. So, you know, I think what I would like to figure out would be if we go forward down the road, you all do some further work, not just on this, but in the long term. What Director Favai is asking is to how, Director Favai, we can satisfy what you're trying to do, because I'm still confused a little bit on, you know, are we interviewing 5 firms, you know, in the future? I mean, you know, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because they might come back with something and you're not going to be. So, you know, we need to set expectations, and maybe that's a conversation for down the road, but what do you think? I mean.
No, I think you're spot on, Director Houston. I think, you know, once we realize when the RFP comes back out, we're gonna know, right? You know, what the process is and what what we need to make it more, more, good work into it. So if it takes for us to talk about the admin code and, add some changes to it or, additional stuff, and then I think we start really focus on that, and then accomplish what we want in the near future. That's always good, right? When we have a lot of the participation of different businesses that's going to participate in this. So I think, and I'm not saying to our rest of our board members that, why it took this long to come to this point, but I think it's just, if we have more eyes on the board that actually looks at this and reviews this and then add additional stuff to the admin code that can help the process move along with EJ and his staff, then I think we're really getting somewhere. We're really doing, what I think a board should be doing.
Just to follow up on that,
There's-
what's the difference in the process between the process we just completed and the process we will restart? Are we gonna change the administrative code in the time being?
No, I would not recommend that because I wouldn't want to amend the admin code in haste. Again, based off of this matter and a few others, I had a conversation with Joe Verne, our legal counsel, and I said, we need to expedite this discussion and bring back, the admin code, I've mentioned this before. It's been put together over many decades and needs to be looked at, but there would not be a change in the admin code. In looking at this process and restarting it, I may broaden it up by adding an outside panelist. And that's why I mentioned the scoring, the evaluation of the written and possibly the interviews would not necessarily change. I can't promise a change in the
So
outcome.
there will be no change except in the evaluation, potentially in the evaluation panel, and that is if you can find somebody who's willing to come and spend 2 days.
That's correct.
Otherwise, the process will remain the same. We may or may not get the same firm submitting. That would be the only alternative. Some firms may decide, I already went through this process. I don't need to be jerked around.
That's possible.
I use that terminology because I've been the subject of that in submitting a proposal and have them all rejected. And then they said, resubmit. And I said, thank you.
Look, 100% agree, by the way. And I've been on the other side too. On the business side too, where like, we're not going to keep submitting these, we're wasting our time. So here's again, what I'm going to do I will back Director Pavai on this, but what I also would like to see is, we've got to figure out a process to a degree. So things like this, we don't have to have come back and with them with staff.
I think that was Director Gray amendment to my motion, which we agreed to, that would be that we go ahead and proceed with a recommendation and then address all of those charges. And we would have the time to deliberate and address them.
I don't want to belabor this too long, but I think we're ready to make a vote.
I was just gonna make a ruling because we have both a motion and amended motion, both seconded, both being discussed at the same time. So we have to kind of get our act together here. And I would think we need to vote on the amended motion.
You have-
The motion on the floor is for staff recommendation with an instruction to staff to follow up on the concerns raised by Director Fave on processing the admin code.
So if there's no objection, we'll call roll on the amended motion.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes,
Director Tommy Favai,
No,
Director Desi Alvarez,
Yes,
Director Scott Houston.
No.
President Don Deere.
Oh,
Motion fails.
all right. Now we'll go back to the original motion.
Are we ready to vote?
Any further discussion on the original motion?
The original motion was to reject all bids and begin the RFP process again. Director Gloria Gray,
yes,
Director Tommy Favai,
yes,
Director Desi Alvarez,
no,
Director Scott Houston,
Yes.
President Don Deere.
Yes, and that motion passes.
Thank you for the direction, and staff will begin implementing this immediately.
That was clear as mud. Going now to item number 6, information calendar.
Yes, President Deere, this item is the start of our 2026 and 2027 fiscal year budget process. It is our budget workshop number 1, and we do have a presentation for you. For this presentation, we'll have Wendy O'Kelly, our Chief Financial Officer, with the presentation, and the item begins on packet page 40. So with that, I'll hand it off to Wendy.
Afternoon, President, Board of Directors. Today is workshop number 1 for fiscal year 26-27. This begins our budget development process. And I'll begin with our agenda. The first workshop does focus on the financial overview of revenues, expenditures, and then also key drivers. And finally, rate considerations that we'll have for you today. Overall, our objective for this meeting, this workshop, is to provide a proposed budget and receive direction from the board before we move into our subsequent budget workshops, which are going to be more detailed in the revenues, expenditures, and then also those rates and charges. And then thereafter, we'll also be looking at CIP discussions as well. On our next slide, we can begin with the overall workshop schedule. So after today's workshop, as I mentioned, we'll be focusing today on the fiscal drivers, financial summaries of revenues, rates, and expenditures. And then April, we do plan to provide the board with a more detailed discussion that does include follow-up from today's workshop, and then detailed rates, revenues, and expenditures. Following that detailed workshop, we would like to present the board with the proposed CIP budget and funding strategies sometime in May. And then finally presenting to the board information, or presenting to the customers and stakeholders a budget workshop somewhere in mid-May. And then with that, I would like to talk to you about the fiscal drivers, the key fiscal drivers for this budget cycle. So for this budget, if there's a theme or concept for this budget year, I would say that we are proposing to the board a structurally tight but fiscal year. And so you'll see in the presentation today, we're presenting what is carefully calibrated a budget proposal that does remove any one-time costs and expenditure proposals that are pretty much essential and structural to the business of the district. So there are 6 primary fiscal drivers, which include the imported water rate increases that's coming from MET. We saw that yesterday in the MET caucus. And then also there are salary and benefit considerations that we see every year, sales volume variability, debt service obligations. Then this year we are going to see some election compliance costs that are cyclical. And then last, we'll wrap it up with that O&M structural efficiencies. That would be a translation into like reduced cost and improved performance over the long term. So we will begin with the metropolitan imported water cost. In January, we will see a dip in that volumetric rate. You can see within the red square of imported water. However, in the lower portion of the slide, there are 3 new treatment charges that are being introduced. One is a fixed charge and the other 2 are based on acre feet. And so although these costs are largely pass-through costs, it still will directly impact that RSC consideration that the board will make. And it will add to that tier 1 rate for West Basin. And this will be more explained in the later slides of this presentation. And then the next fiscal driver that I'd like to talk about is salary and benefits. Historically, employer-sponsored health insurance premiums just for all businesses, all agencies have shown increases that have outpaced inflation. So here, what I did is I looked at the West Basin medical increases for the past 2 years, and 2 years in a row, we did see identical 7% increases to medical costs. And so for the assumptions for this fiscal year, 26-27, I am including an 8%, which equates to an overall 66,000 increase to our medical premiums, for this budget proposal. And then in COLA and merit category, as it relates to salary and benefits, in the proposal, there is a placeholder. However, the specificity of this category will be updated in subsequent budget workshops. And then moving on to pension contributions, based on just salary increases and then also a slight tick in the employer contribution rates from CalPERS, we are seeing an overall 12% increase in contributions, and then that equates dollar-wise to $119,000. And last, or as it relates to salary and benefits directly, is our unfunded accrued liability, otherwise known as our UAL payment that we make annually. This actually does have a significant increase this year. So we are seeing a 49% increase, which equates to about an additional $130,000 of UAL. And then not directly related to salary and benefits, but to personnel, we have some increases in our workforce development, which includes legal services, and then also DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so you'll see some more of that detail, because that budget is, or that dollar amount is placed in the overhead budget for HR. So just to keep in mind, when it comes to salary and benefits, for the most part, these are predictable increases. And then our next slide, I'll be talking about sales volume variability, which are more of those unpredictable or less predictable adjustments.
Mr. President.
Yes, go ahead.
So I understand. So
Sure.
literally all of these are the costs you're estimating to go up, right?
Yes,
And the TBD, we don't know that.
the to be determined will be determined hopefully in the subsequent
Yeah.
workshops. But yes, these are related to 26-27.
Just with this, just adding these numbers, that's like, without the TBD, that's $411,000. Right?
Correct. That's correct.
Good to know. I mean, that's a significant amount of money that we just automatically, we're expecting, will be coming at us.
Yes, well, in some of the later slides, you'll see the overall, without giving you the number today or right now, this moment, that you'll see the overall increase to expenses.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're gonna be asking questions as we go along. On
Sure.
the workforce planning and development, you said that's broken down into legal expenses and DEI.
DEIB, yes, there is a consultant that we are working with, and there's some other costs that are in the overall HR number that I will be showing in subsequent slides. But yes, there is a budget increase, and we're creating a separate budget line item for legal services that are directed specifically for HR personnel matters.
Okay, so can we get a breakdown of that? Bring that back then, because right now it's one lump sum. Unless
Yes.
you have the number.
In the next workshop, I will be presenting more detailed, and we'll have longer conversations about each category in the expenses that have an increase.
My question is, why do we need to break that up? What's the legal services and what's our outside legal services above and beyond what we already are incurring for our general fund service?
I'm sorry, your question is, why do we need to break it up?
Yeah, in other words, why are we requiring additional legal services for workforce planning and development outside of what our general counsel services already are? So we,
Well, I was just gonna say, I want you to know that we are taking detailed notes. We're gonna be able to answer most questions as they go, but also when you ask for line items, we're taking notes on all deliverables. We'll be sending that out to the full board.
I just wanted to
Yes.
put it out there because we're gonna go, and it's a good thing that we take the notes now instead of having to come back and say, let's go back to slide number 17 or whatever this one is. And then, anyways, that breakdown is just, I'd be interested why we're incurring that above and beyond what we've already done in the past.
Director, I will be able to provide you with that breakdown on April 2nd for the detail.
I wonder, did we not recognize an employee union this year? And are they pressing for additional funds in any of these categories?
We're currently working with ASME 1902 and hope to further those discussions in the coming weeks. I know that they had an opportunity to present before the board at the February board meeting. So we'll continue to work with them and hopefully bring that to you for your consideration.
Usually union members expect their union to push for higher wages for them. That's kind of a given. And it happens, but at least it's an effort they make. All right, now go on. Thank you. Where are we here?
Next slide. I don't have the page, I'm sorry. Page 48.
48.
So for the sales volume variability, we'll start with recycled water. This gives you an 8-year outlook or historical look. Over the past years, the demand for recycled water has fluctuated, as you can see in this chart. And the trend here shows the district's, basically the district recovery from significant impact to water demand in the earlier years. Essentially, the variability as shown here is the reflection of several factors, and some of them are predictable, as I mentioned earlier. Staff not only analyzes the average demand for budget assumptions when it comes to acre feet, but they also contact those larger customers to bring concrete data to the board that can also impact that demand. And then there's some non-predictable ones, which may include shutdowns that occur without any notice. And then also turnaround procedures where the refinery may shut down for a few months to conduct their normal repair and rehab. And then I would say overall, when production is impacted, not in all, but in most cases, you'll see there's a typical adjustment to expenditures as well.
On recycled water, I would hope that as we move forward, now that we have a new operator, and we're going to make an effort to increase our deliveries and our reliability from the plant. And I'd like to see more water in the future for the barrier.
I hear you loud and clear.
We'll move to the potable. And similarly, potable water sales shows a similar variability to recycled water, where we see volumes decline in those conservation years. And then although we aren't seeing aggressive growth in potable, you do see a stabilization in those past 3 to 4 years. These are two categories, our budget assumptions, but just for the year in projection for 25-26, we are projecting about 88,000 acre feet ending the year. And so the revenue basically from potable does remain one of our largest revenue streams, which makes this a key fiscal driver. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
On the 25-26, then we budget 80,000 acre feet, not 81.8.
And so some of these numbers get a little confusing. So the 80,000 is what we budgeted. The 1,800 does include the barrier, the Dominguez Gap.
We budget for the barrier separately?
Yeah, it was not always, but last year, the board, in the board workshop, kind of selected where we budgeted. Don't forget, we had projected or proposed a higher budget.
Go back and check. Thank you.
And then final key fiscal budget driver would be some of our statutory obligations, which I mentioned briefly, was the administration of election costs, which we're looking at an estimation of $1.5 million. And then also the annual customary annual principal debt service payment that is projected to be $21.6 million this year. If there's any questions, I'll move on to the 26-27 revenues.
Let's just go back to the portable water sale. You're gonna budget at 83,200. That include then the barrier?
That does not include the
That's correct. It
West-
is not.
coastal barrier. It includes the Dominguez Gap, correct?
That is correct.
So 1,800 again for barrier one?
Director Alvarez, let's clarify with Matt Day.
83,200 is the retail imported, so the barrier imported would be on top of this.
I would suggest that we stay at 80,000 for retail import. Because it's bouncing around, but overall, the long-term trend is still going down. And right now, we're very flat around that 80,000 number.
And Director Alvarez, it's important to note that last year, you had made that recommendation and the full board, supported that effort. I'm just looking across the dais to see if there are any concerns about that. We're happy to adjust that number.
I would do it, Director Alvarez. Keep it conservative.
Thank you.
Okay, so given the key fiscal drivers that we discussed, one of the most important components of this year's budget is our revenue outlook. So we'll look at expenditures a little bit later, but they are relatively fixed and influenced by external factors. Our revenues are, as we just discussed with acre feet for potable water, they fluctuate based on the water sales and other things like weather patterns and customer operations. So I'll walk you through a few slides for revenue and then also give you a couple of the assumptions, and we can again discuss those assumptions and make any adjustments for the subsequent budget workshops. So just was going to explain the 83,200 acre feet of sales assumptions, but we just moved that to a recommendation for 80,000 acre feet. But what you will see in the operating revenues number is based on 83,200. So that will be adjusted in budget workshop 2 for you. Then the next one is the recycled water, which primarily does reflect the updated water sales volume projections as well. So you'll see in parentheses, last year we did budget for 34,988 acre feet. And this year staff is proposing 34,341 acre feet. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, there was a stable recovery for recycled water sales. So staff did feel like this was a conservative budget approach for fiscal year 26-27. So compared to last year, you will see a drop in that revenue, just based on dropping also those the volume of acre feet. And then the next,
Going back to the recycled water, if you could,
the chart,
just from the revenue point of view
Sure.
and actually from sales too. So I understand that we're not selling as much recycled water. Some of that has to do with operational issues at the plant that I think are hopefully being addressed. So from a sensitivity analysis viewpoint, when you come back, can you, if you want to bring back these same numbers, but also show that if we increase our recycled water delivery from the 34,000 to maybe 36,000, what would that implications mean? In other words, really, if we can deliver more water to the barriers, I think that's our biggest opportunity that we have missed on this past year.
And again, to touch on, I see Susanna Lee in the back. One of the things that really impacted us this year, in fact, is just the shutdown of the barrier. And so we've been doing a great job, I think, of recent as far as the amount and the percent of recycled water as far as the recharge goes. And so we have seen that number go back up, but we did have that shutdown, which took quite a bit longer than we anticipated. And so we're always striving, it's budget rates and production here at West Basin. And so we'll continue to work on that, but we'll look at that 36,000.
thank you, Director. The next two revenue categories I'd like to discuss are going to be the fixed charges associated with public information and education, and then also water policy and resources development. So these revenues are our fixed charges. They are tied directly to the approved budgets for each department And then also additional amounts that are calculated in them will include salary benefits and then overhead allocations as they relate to those two different departments. Once those costs are determined, they're all incorporated into this number. And then that is billed to our retail agencies. So you will see an increase in that number based on the increase in how the fluctuation of expenditures. If expenditures go up, these revenue sources will also be impacted.
So where are they buried in our rates?
There is a capacity charge that is a direct fixed charge that we calculate each year based on, and we do take a 3-year average sales, and that's how we allocate it to each one of the retailers.
It's not the capacity charge. It's a fixed charge.
I apologize, it's a fixed
Yeah,
charge.
it's a fixed charge to our retailers based off of those two budgets.
Above and beyond our base rates, or it's
Yes.
embedded in the base rate?
No, it's.
It is an external charge. That's a fixed service charge.
Look at our rate sheets. Can you point out to me where that is?
It's in the bottom section of the rate sheet. I think you'll see a total amount of, does it say 11 or 13,000? I have to look at it.
Yeah, that's the capacity charge. This is.
And then there's one right next to it.
I'm pulling it up now to just make sure. Yeah, if you look actually just to the right of the capacity charge,
Fixed service charge.
that is our fixed service charge.
So above and beyond our commodity rate, our RTS, if you will, we are then passing on charges for the high WPRD,
That's correct.
and that adds up to another 7,000 per agency?
No, it's not the set. I'm sorry, are you looking at we have the breakdown in the resolution of the amount that each agency pays because they pay a proportional rate based on an allocation of a 3 years.
So that's the total reality. Okay, just explain to me then, it doesn't have units on here, fixed service charge in the rate sheet.
The total for this current year, fiscal year 25-26, would be a collected revenue amount of 7.3 million.
Mhm.
But each agency would pay a portion of that month, broken down by month.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then, excuse me, we did reach out to our investment consultants, and so we received some budget numbers, which shows for investment income for this coming year is going to be a slight increase. So you're looking at $100 added to that revenue line item. And then our last line item is of other revenues. This category does typically consist of grant funding and then our municipal assistant agreement funds from MET. So we are seeing a slight reduction of $51,000 in that category. So what I did add and take a conservative approach is currently contracted or those contracts or agreements that are approved already. And then in the final two are our non-operating revenues, and that would be standby charge and the fixed payments from refineries. So the refinery category is increased a little bit. We are seeing that number is combined of 3 total refinery agreements that are currently in place. And then there's a stabilization of our standby revenues. We are agreed between now and 2030 to collect the $7.6 million. And the next slide, this is just the overview of those two numbers. So when you take the operating plus the non-operating revenues and look at it from 25-26 to also 26-27, overall, we're looking at a 2% increase from last year's adopted budget revenues. When we look again in subsequent slides, primarily you want to see that percentage of 2% growth in revenues kind of balance out to our expenditures. So you will see the expenditures are trending closer to 6% at this time. And some of these numbers will be all adjusted based on the acre feet that we come back with and the revenue associated with that for workshop 2. And then in this final chart for revenues, it's just giving you an overall historical revenue trend. And so you can see from 2020 actuals all the way to 26-27 proposed, just how the district has overall remained relatively stable with fluctuations that were tied to sales and just volume, sales and volume, but also sometimes the revenue is adjusted based on timing of receiving grants. If grants are presented in one year, but then maybe realized in the next year, you will see that fluctuation year over year. Any questions before we move on to expenditures? In the next slide, I will walk you through the expenditure side of the budget and the key factors driving the proposed increases for 26-27. And as we move through these categories, you will see some of the increases that we were speaking about earlier with the fiscal drivers. And so in our proposed operating expenses, there is a slight increase in recycled water. This is largely driven by the contractual increase that we have with our O&M agreement. And so that is roughly half of this number. And then the remaining portion reflects a preliminary assumption that we are including into this budget workshop that we will be more finalized in subsequent workshops. And that is the proposal of 2 contract operator positions, which staff has not approved at this time. It is requesting more information, justifications for these positions, but there is a placeholder in this particular workshop.
This is from our contractor.
That's correct.
They were supposed to be driving the overall cost down. That was the premise.
That is correct. So we'll
So remind them that don't come back with additional requests that you're gonna drive the cost down.
I agree.
Your-
I don't disagree with
Your
you.
job is to deliver on your promise.
Understood. We will bring back more detail and then true up those numbers in the next detailed workshop. And then for water use efficiency, department budget does include additional funding. This is supporting the implementation of AB 1572 that staff has talked to you and brought to the board. This, just a reminder, that does prohibit the use of potable water for irrigation of non-functional turf in public, government, and commercial spaces. So that is the increase for additional outreach and programming. And then in the next 2 categories for public information and water policy, there is a reduction to their expenditures. This does not mean necessarily a reduction to services or programs. And so overall, you will see in the operating expenditures, this category for the departments, there is a 2% overall increase. And then I would like to walk you through our next category. And our next expenditure is the proposed salaries and benefits. So off to the far right for staff members, you will see that our staffing levels are still aligned with the fiscal year, current year, fiscal year 25-26. We are seeing that the district's operational needs and delivery requirements are still being met. And so we are not proposing any increases to the staff members. And then also, if we just take you through between the 25-26 adopted and the proposed, you will see overall at the bottom, we went from 11.59 million to 12.86 million. This is with some of those increases that I spoke about before, also including a placeholder that, without getting into too much detail, that is for merit and COLA. And then just some other benefits factors as well that we have in, like OPEB and other assumptions that will be increasing throughout the 26-27 year. Salaries?
A question on the insurance. I noticed that there's nothing when it comes to, is there a number to this?
There is a number. We just, for presentation purposes, we didn't want to put it in the overall full-time employees, but we have fluctuated between 6 and 8 from that I've seen.
We will continue to do that.
And there is budget for the interns, so the 200,000.
overall, it's pretty hefty increase though. It's still 10% plus.
We are looking at that number in the subsequent budget slides, but again, I can break that cost down for you and be able to show you how much comes from CalPERS and some of the other higher categories that also make up that number. So this is where you will see the overall 1.2 is reflection of salary proposals, merit proposals, and then in addition to that, there's going to be the UAL costs that I spoke about, the pension contributions, and then also medical increases. So all of those assumptions are added into this number,
Including the placeholder.
the placeholder, correct. And then our final expenditure category is overhead, and these are all of the departments that contribute to the overall operations of the district. And you will see there's a increase to the overall, which is by 46%. And this is largely driven by those election related costs that is associated with the upcoming November election. So the percentage is significant and it is a recurring compliance requirement that we are looking at maybe breaking out and making sure that that dollar amount does show in every single budget year. So we won't see just spikes in our rates based on increases to election costs in on years and then not on off years. So to kind of equalize it in all years, all budget years.
Question.
Yes.
So this is above and beyond personnel costs for these overhead.
Correct, Director. What I've done in the first 3 slides in expenditures is I've broken them out into operating expenses, then salary and benefit expenses, and then also overhead expenses. In the next slide, you will see that rolled up. And so in the next slide, this is our total proposed expenses for fiscal year 26-27. And this is where you will see, as I mentioned earlier, that rate increase of 2%, or excuse me, that revenue increase of 2%. And then when you look at the expenditure side, there's a growth of 6% overall. And this is what now taking those 3 categories and combining them into one. In comparison to where we are now in our adopted budget of 25-26, we were at 66.7 million. And the proposal is at this time 4.2 million over that. 1.5 million of that is contributed to the election costs, then that placeholder, which for salary and benefits, and then also the recycle water. Those are the main 3 contributors. In the next slide, there is the debt payment service schedule that we have for you. And in the last column, you will see how that is bumped up against the standby revenue charge that is scheduled to go away in 4 more years, which will add up to 2030. So this debt schedule, you will see there are no new considerations or proposals for any debt issuances at this time. And then this graph is the expenditure history for the last 8 years. In the actual numbers, debt service was included, so I wanted to not overinflate the number by showing 92 million for proposed, but to allow the board of directors to look at the 70 million budget proposal, but then adding in also that $21 million debt service payment that is made each year to give you a full perspective of how expenses have looked bumped up against the actuals, which includes debt service. And then keep in mind, this graph does not include CIP. CIP is scheduled to have a discussion in subsequent sessions, later sessions. And then I wanted to also show just kind of the same information, taking the revenue history and the expenditure history and looking at that 8-year trend from 2020 to where we are proposing now. So the blue line does represent our total revenues. The orange line is a reflection of total expenditures. And so over this period, you can see that revenues have generally trended upward. And there's adjustments that you'll see that it's, as it moves, it's reflecting to those rates, and stabilizations and sales volumes as well. And then over time, expenditures have also increased, but the district, in my opinion, has continued to manage the expenditure growth relative to the revenue growth. And so kind of keeping us fiscally balanced.
Comment on this graph, it's good to see that between 23-24 and 24-25, our actuals actually went down. That's a very good trend. We don't know what the actuals are yet for 25-26, so you're showing the budgeted. That's a slightly more than the actuals for 24-25. Any idea that maybe that might come in lower? And
So
continue that nice trend that we started to establish?
I can update this slide with our year-end projections for 25-26 for the second budget workshop. It was something that I included in the mid-year. And what we're seeing overall in the mid-year numbers is that our budget revenues were at 105%, our expenditures were at 110%. So net revenues, we were looking at around 5 million in the positive.
That's net revenue, but net expenditures.
The net expenditures, I don't have the dollar amount, but we're at 102%. So of that 66 million, we're about 2% higher than that.
We're not trending down.
We're not trending down in expenses, but if you take expenses and revenues, you will not see it higher.
Still making more money than we're spending, but we're spending more in.
And sometimes that's not a reflection of budget. It is a reflection of how those costs carry over to the next fiscal year.
I think in the past, we've been very consistent. So I'm going back to 24-25 was very good. It'd be nice to see something like that for 25-26, but I understand we won't see that. Okay.
So now we have the rates and charges for 26, 27. These are just scenarios, as always, that we that provide the framework for the 26, 27 budget. Again, these numbers, based on the discussions, will have the 83,000 acre feet, but will be modified and adjusted in later workshops. So in this slide, what I did is try to best incorporate the MET increases, and then MET is on a calendar year rate change, and West Basin is on a fiscal year rate change. So hopefully with the complexity of all those different situations, that I was able to articulate how the rate change or how RSC up against MET's rate changes will be played out. So the first section of this chart demonstrates where we are now in the fiscal year. And so using the same reliability service charge of 321, that anticipated RSC charge is about 26 million, 26.7 million. If we were to look at fiscal year 26, 27, keeping the same RSC charge, again, this would be based on the 83,200 acre feet, it would be 26.7 million. And then you'll see those numbers start to grow as I give you scenarios for a 3% RSC increase, 4%, 5%, and 6% scenario. And overall, every 1% equates to the $200,000 rate increase. Any questions on this slide?
No, I was just going to say that raising our rates is going to be, in my opinion, challenging, just because of the overall rates that we have seen go up over the last 15 years, 20 years. And every year we seem to keep going up and up and up, and you're showing a range here of 0 to 6%. I'd like to see us come back close to that 0%. If you look at our West Basin rates, in 2002, the West Basin rate was $30. In 2026, it's $321. That's gone up by 10. That's much, much more than CPI increases. And really, when you look at affordability, you can continue to look at these numbers and say, how do you justify going up at such a greater rate than just the CPI? If we were to go up by the CPI rate, our rates would be significantly less than this. We're spending 10 times more money today as we were spending in, or not spending, but we are charging 10 times more today than we were in 2000. Over 10 times, yeah, almost 11. It was $30 in 2000, 321 today.
That's a long time ago, but
But I can tell you that
yes.
the price of real estate has gone up tremendously. All right, but my house has not gone up 10 times. It's gone up a lot, all of a sudden. But and real estate is one of those things that has outpaced inflation significantly, but not by orders of magnitude.
I agree with that. And I would just say that, from my perspective, the water industry is just vastly different than it was in 2000. And the impact of the way we've changed has gone throughout an agency like West Basin. And I'll just use one example. In 2000, the term conservation water use efficiency meant something totally different. And the state's regulation and the State Water Resources Control Board regulation of water use efficiency and water use requires advocacy in Sacramento to represent our service area. It requires CIP projects to reduce our water demand. It requires outreach and education and marketing, and it kind of spreads as far as what it takes for us to provide the services that we provide to our service area. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree that affordability is a significant issue. But when you talk, and I would just point to the chairman of Metropolitan Water District, Hidalgo Ortega, talks about the value you get for the cost of 1 gallon of water in the Metropolitan Water District service area, and the services that you get are really second to none. But we're doing everything we can to cut our costs and look to make sure that every investment in a program is maximum value in our service area.
There's no doubt that we have a very reliable and high quality delivery system in place. But still, when you look at the overall continual rate of increases and far outpacing our consumer price index, far outpacing a lot of other things. If you compare the cost of water today with the cost of gasoline, gasoline has gone up, but not anywhere near as much. Okay? And people scream about gasoline. People do scream about their utility rates. So at some point, we need to think about affordability. Not everybody that pays for all of their utilities can afford them. And at the end of the day, they're sitting down at their dinner table and having to make decisions of whether to spend money on their children or pay for their utility bills, etc. It is important that we consider these things. I understand the arguments about the cost. When you look at the rate of increase, far exceeds almost any other commodity out there. As a matter of fact, I couldn't find another commodity that kept up with water. Not just here, Metropolitan has the same issue.
you, Director. The next slide. This table does bring together all of what we just discussed, which is the revenues, excuse me, the expenditures, our debt service payment, consideration of a reliability service charge at each scenario from 0% to 6%. And then I just want to draw your attention to the bottom net revenue, or the amount that would be available for other costs like CIP. And so it just gives you that scenario of what would be the net revenue. I mentioned last budget cycle, and I just like to mention this again for this budget cycle. There is a desire to create a CIP or even just a reserve account as well. So when I look at net revenues just to be fiscally responsible here, I always look at as well, is there a way to move money into reserves as well for later on for other years? So some of that 14 million to the 15 million consideration is CIP that I mentioned here, but also what is not mentioned is potential net revenues. Reserves, excuse me. And then the next slide is the history as, I didn't go back that far for you, Director Alvarez, but I did go back to 2020 for the reliability service charge, which there are 2 years where there were 0% increases in the reliability service charge. And then you can see it went from 3% to 10%, most recently 6% this fiscal year.
Yeah, there were 3 years, 25, 26, and 27, where the reliability service charge stayed the same.
Yes, I didn't include that one.
But when I looked at 25 years from 2000, we're looking at 10. And I know that I compared it to it. Try to find other examples. And I said, wow, I thought real estate would be one, especially in the South Bay. And I'm going, no, that doesn't kind of keep up. And I couldn't find any commodity that did. But maybe you can.
I will not accept the challenge. The next slide is our Title 22 irrigation rate. And just at this time, these rates are consistent with the current adopted rate. So there's no changes at this point in time for any proposals of increases for our irrigation rate. And the final slide, this does conclude Budget Workshop 1. I appreciate everyone that was engaged in the process. Just a reminder that today's discussion did focus on just that fiscal outlook, the key budget drivers that we discussed, and then, excuse me, preliminary rate scenario for 26, 27. And if there aren't any further direction or guidance, I will take the notes that Desiree and EJ took along with my notes to bring back some changes and some fine-tuned numbers for budget shop number 2.
Maybe if I could just add to that, what we're going to do is we're going to take an approach where we're going to respond to questions and requests as soon as possible. So we'll kind of send a wave of materials as we gather them, and that way you're not waiting or getting everything all at once. Secondly, I do take the opportunity to bug you for your time to meet and discuss West Basin issues, and I'm going to be bringing this presentation as well as this subsequent presentations to those one-on-one meetings. And I'm happy to drill down and discuss the specific issues, but also the overall budget and our financial wherewithal or well-being with all of you during those meetings. So you're going to get a healthy dose of the information here through our board process, but also in those one-on-ones. So that concludes the presentation.
Good. Comments?
None.
Thank you very much, staff.
Thank you.
Very thorough.
Yeah.
We'll go to item 6, information count, item 7, closed sessions, no closed sessions, Trent.
We have no closed session items.
Item 8, director comments and increase. And items, directors, comments? Mr. Gray, any comments? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to staff.